The movie begins in Massachusetts in November 1951, where two men, Bernie and Gus, arrive to meet two ladies for a date. Bernie has been corresponding with one of them, Miriam, for months, but has never met her in person, so he is extremely nervous. Yet when they finally meet, he is captivated by her beauty, and they share an instant connection. The four then go to a pub, spending the evening drinking and laughing together, enjoying the warmth of each other's company. During their conversation, they talk about the thrill of riding a small boat, but it turns out Miriam is very afraid of the sea, so Bernie, being a member of the Coast Guard, decides to borrow a larger boat from an acquaintance who readily agrees. Miriam, excited by this gesture, kisses Bernie before they get on the boat, showing their growing affection. The scene then shifts to February 17, 1952, where Bernie and Miriam are seen dancing joyfully at a party. While they are enjoying the moment, Miriam suddenly asks Bernie if he will marry her, but he hesitates and unexpectedly refuses, which engages her, causing her to storm outside. Bernie follows and explains that his hesitation comes from fear of the dangers of his job and the unpredictable stormy weather at sea, admitting that he might not always return home. Miriam then boldly asks whether he is afraid of the sea or of marriage. After thinking, Bernie realizes he doesn't want to lose her and agrees to marry her, choosing April 16th as their wedding date. However, due to Coast Guard regulations, Bernie says he must first seek permission from his commanding officer. A few days later, about 9 miles northeast of Chatham, Massachusetts, the oil tanker SS Pendleton is struggling against a powerful storm. At first, life on board seems normal, with sailors resting, some napping, and cooks chatting in the galley. Suddenly, the ship is struck by a violent jolt, sending objects crashing to the floor and tossing crew members out of their bunks. A major leak opens in the hull, slowing the tanker as it fights against massive waves, and soon, the rolling sea tilts the ship violently until the hull suddenly snaps in half. Meanwhile, at the Coast Guard station, Bernie and his colleagues tensely listen to radio reports about another ship, the Fort Mercer, which has also been damaged. They learn that rescue crews from Boston and Nantucket are already on their way, and rumors spread that the Chatham station, where Bernie works, may be called next. Outside, the storm rages fiercely with winds gusting up to 100 kilometers per hour. While this chaos unfolds, Bernie approaches his commander, Clough, to ask for permission to marry Miriam, but Clough dismisses him and immediately orders the crew to assemble, directing them to head to the docks to secure a fishing boat for a rescue mission. Back on the Pendleton, the surviving crew members pray for safety as they realize the ship is broken apart and only half of it remains afloat. A crewman named Brown insists they must lower the lifeboat immediately, but the captain disagrees, saying such a small boat cannot survive in the raging sea. To make matters worse, their SOS signal and radio are damaged, leaving them unable to contact anyone. The captain then turns to Seibert, a skilled and knowledgeable crewman, for advice. Seibert explains that the lifeboat is too small and would capsize almost instantly, yet he calculates that the broken ship can stay afloat for 4 to 5 hours. He then devises a daring plan to manually move the ship's rudder using a steel beam and ropes, steering the Pendleton toward a nearby reef where they can ground the ship and signal for help by blowing the whistle. The crew agrees, though Brown stubbornly argues, causing tension. In the midst of this, the radio suddenly connects, revealing that Fort Mercer has also been wrecked and rescue crews are already deployed there. The Pendleton crew realizes with horror that help might not come in time, and they may be left to die. Meanwhile, Bernie talks to Miriam by phone, and she asks whether he's asked Clough for permission to marry. But he says he hasn't had the chance and abruptly hangs up as Clough announces that the crew must sail the CG-36500 from Old Harbor to rescue the Fort Mercer, located 30 kilometers east of Nantucket. Almost everyone refuses because such a mission seems suicidal in the stormy conditions, suggesting instead the slower but safer CG-36383 from Stake Harbor. However, Clough orders Bernie to lead the mission, so Bernie reluctantly agrees and heads to the docks with 2 men. Back on Pendleton, Seibert and his partner are struggling to assemble the manual steering, short on manpower. When Seibert discovers that Brown and others are trying to lower the lifeboat, he storms to the deck with an axe, cutting the rope and letting the lifeboat crash into the sea, where it immediately shatters under the waves. Brown is furious and attacks Seibert, but when the others see the lifeboat destroyed in seconds, they realize Seibert was right. Seibert explains calmly that while the lifeboat is too small for the sea, the ship might still float until nightfall if they act wisely. He assigns men to maneuver the rudder beam, others to handle the pumps and horn, and everyone begins working. Meanwhile, Bernie and his colleagues reach the pier amid a heavy snowstorm. A local man tells them he heard a ship's horn and saw a vessel in distress from afar. Bernie takes his men back to the Chatham station to investigate, discovering that the ship that broke apart is indeed the Pendleton, located just 8 kilometers away. 2 ships breaking apart in one day is unprecedented, leaving the team stunned. With the Boston and Nantucket stations focused on Fort Mercer, Clough orders Bernie to gather a crew and board CG-36500. Bernie agrees, reassuring his hesitant teammates that he knows the waters well and will do his best regardless of the danger. Gus, unfortunately, is too sick to join, so 3 others, Richard, Andy, and Irvin, volunteer to go. Meanwhile, Miriam senses something is wrong and calls the station, but Bernie, preparing to depart, doesn't answer. At the same time, the Pendleton's condition worsens as towering waves slam into it, tilting at almost 90 degrees, flooding compartments and threatening to sink it at any moment. Back in Chatham, Miriam arrives at the station and becomes furious to learn that Bernie Bernie has been sent on such a dangerous mission. Meanwhile, on the Pendleton, the men desperately hold onto chains to keep from being thrown around as massive waves batter the ship. An iron beam punches a hole through the hull, worsening the flooding as Seibert struggles to maintain control. Miriam, hearing Bernie must cross a large sandbar, grows even more worried and confronts Clough in his office, demanding he call the crew back. Clough, annoyed, refuses, saying that asking for permission to marry is merely a formality and her fiance's safety isn't her concern, so she storms out angrily and drives away, but the icy road causes her car to skid and crash, trapping her. Meanwhile, Bernie and his team fight against the storm in their small boat. Bernie steers as captain, while the others sit up front, scanning for waves. Irvin begins singing to calm everyone, and his teammates join, but suddenly, huge waves slam into them, threatening to capsize the boat. Bernie keeps control, guiding them carefully over the sandbar, but they lose their compass in the chaos, and the engine stalls. And he works frantically to fix it as a 10-meter wave rises ahead. Fortunately, the engine restarts just in time, allowing Bernie to push through and clear the sandbar. Night falls, and on the Pendleton, one of the pumps fails. Seibert orders full use of all remaining pumps and carefully turns the ship 30 degrees to brace for impact. Soon, the hull hits rocks, shaking everyone violently, but they manage to land on the reef. Meanwhile, Miriam, rescued from the crash by a kind woman and her children, learns the woman's brother can fix her car. When Miriam mentions Bernie, the woman recognizes him, saying he once tried to save her husband, who died fishing near Nantucket. Back on the Pendleton, chaos reigns as Brown again accuses Seibert of seeking glory, mocking him for having no family. But Seibert defends himself, saying he's just as scared and wants to live too. Meanwhile, Bernie's team tries to contact Chatham Station, but the radio connection is poor. They learn that the CG-36383 crew abandoned their mission because of the storm, and some of Bernie's men suggest turning back, but Bernie refuses to give up after coming so far. Elsewhere, Miriam listens to a broadcast reporting that Boston's Coast Guard has reached Fort Mercer, but lost from men to hypothermia. Turning off the radio, she worries deeply, but clings to hope. On the Pendleton, the ship starts sliding off the reef as the engine floods and lights go out, making them invisible in the dark. Suddenly, Bernie and his crew spot the Pendleton through the storm and feel a surge of relief. The trapped men cheer, knowing someone has come for them despite the storm. But there's a problem: the small CG-36500 can only hold 12 people, while 33 need rescuing. Nevertheless, Bernie maneuvers close as the crew bravely jumps into the freezing sea, with Irvin and Annie pulling each man aboard. When a frightened sailor named Eldon hesitates, Seibert urges him to jump, while another, Tiny, says, "If I can do it, anyone can," before leaping, but he tragically slams against the hull and drowns, shocking everyone. Despite the horror, the rescue continues until 30 survivors are aboard, with Brown and Seibert the last to leave. Moments later, the Pendleton sinks before their eyes. Meanwhile, Miriam returns to the station, where everyone listens anxiously as Bernie reports success, but admits they've lost the compass. Clough orders him to head to Pollock Lightship, but Bernie, trusting his instincts, disobeys and turns off the radio. Suddenly, the town loses power, leaving no lights to guide them. However, Bernie remembers that when they left, the wind blew from the left, and now it's from the right, so he steers accordingly. The townspeople, led by Miriam, drive to the pier, turning on their headlights to create a beacon. After a long, freezing struggle, Bernie and his men finally see the glow of the shore and safely reach the pier to a crowd of cheering townsfolk. Exhausted but alive, Bernie reunites with Miriam, who embraces him joyfully. Laughing, Bernie remarks that asking Clough's permission was just a formality. The movie ends with real photographs showing the aftermath of the heroic rescue, revealing that Bernie and Miriam married 2 months later and remained happily together for 58 years until Bernie's passing in 2009, while he and his crew received the Gold Life-Saving Medal for their extraordinary bravery. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.